Hey everyone, this is Sam Callan. I'm your host for our Coach Developer Conference call this month, where my guest is Diane Culver. And so as we go through this, I'll introduce Diane in just a moment, but I have my perfunctory announcements. As everybody knows, probably, past calls are available on Apple Podcast, also the YouTube and Google Play. I beg of you to subscribe and leave a review, as that actually helps other people find the podcast. I'm going to plug this once again every month until everybody I know has taken the I Coach Kids EU MOOC, the Developing Effective Environments for Youth Sport. I think it's a great asset for you and for you to share with your coaches and coach developers. And of course, we've got the USCC Coach Developer Summit coming up in June here. There's some information on registration deadlines, and there's the URL as well if you need it. Next month, Jennifer Royer from True Sport is going to be joining us and talking about what True Sport does and their role and how they can integrate and work with all of us in the coaching education world. And during the call, as always, if you want to chat, if you want to fire a question to Diane that comes up, if you just hit the little bubble up there, you can do that. I check that throughout the call, and if you have a good question, I'll throw it in addition to the list that I have. So, as I said, today we're with Diane Culver, and she is an associate professor at the University of Ottawa. And her area really is communities of practice and social learning theory, and that's what we're going to get into today. And a little bit about her background, I'll let her elaborate on this, as she's been involved in Alpine Canada coach education and as a past key coach both with Canada and New Zealand. And as with so many coach educating folks, it seems like, she is involved in the Sports Psychology Association in Canada. So Diane, welcome to the call, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yep. So anything, tell us a little bit about, I got some very, general things there. How did you get involved in becoming a coach educator? And then we can talk about how you got involved in the communities of practice.
Okay. Well, so I coached, I was a high performance athlete on the national ski team, probably retired quite, a relatively young age, and went straight into coaching. And after doing that for quite a few years, well, first of all, because I was a high performance athlete, I kind of had the situation that quite a few high performance athletes who are going to coaching have, which is I was invited very quickly, sort of in my second year off the national team, to start working with the national team, so with high performance athletes. So I did that for a few years, and then I thought that, when that opportunity came up, that it would be really a great way for me to learn about coaching. But actually, I ended up, being everything for that team, manager, everything, and had very little opportunity to really learn from the coaches around me. So that sent me on a pathway where I went back to the basics, and actually went back after 4 years of coaching to working in one of the big ski schools here in Eastern Canada that was very well known for producing. Our Ski Instructors Alliance actually has levels similar to coaching organizations, and this ski school at Tremblant was known for producing level 4, which is the highest level of ski instructors. And I thought, well, if I go there, I'm going to learn from the bottom up about technique. So, and then went back to coaching after a number of years working there and working with the Canadian Ski Coaches Federation and Canadian Ski Instructors Alliance, training coaches and instructors. So really, the social learning aspect, I guess, was something that it seemed like to me always was a natural way to learn. And after coaching for 20 years, I decided to go back to university to study, actually, originally sports psychology. And then when I got into my master's, I realized that oftentimes we know very well that sports psychology techniques, if athletes engage in them, can really optimize their performance. However, oftentimes it's more the coach that sometimes gets in the way in terms of creating that ideal environment for the athlete to perform in. So I decided to focus my research on the coaching aspect, and that's what led me into coach development. And at the time that I was starting my PhD, which was actually in education, one of my professors there had just bought Etienne Wenger's 1998 book about communities of practice, and he introduced us to that, and I brought it back to my supervisor, and we decided that this would be an interesting theoretical framework to use for my PhD research. So that was, and that was 20 years ago now, so I've really been working with social learning theory during that time, and engaging quite steadily with the theorists, because they conduct workshops every year. So I go to these 4-day workshops, and for years and years, I was the only person in sport, and I'm happy to say that last year at the workshop, we had John Bales, who was the president of the ICCE, was there, and this year we have one of the workshops, which usually there are about 10 people in them. We're going to be 6 people from sports, so it's pretty exciting. I think we're finally starting to like a tipping point as far as social learning theory and coach education goes.
Well, that's fantastic. So let's start with what is social learning theory? Maybe give us a primer on that.
Okay, well, really, it's more or less the way human beings have always learned. So if we take it right back to the beginning of, caveman or cave person era, before we were writing things down, and obviously thousands and thousands of years before we ever had schools and universities, we learned through our community that we lived in. So we had, examples. We learned by observation. We learned by talking to each other, by solving problems together. So really, it's a very kind of, in a lot of ways, a kind of intuitive way of learning. But it's so intuitive that it was kind of left behind in the whole formalization of education, I would say. So essentially, there's 3 really important assumptions that underlie social learning theory. They are that as humans, we are fundamentally social beings, so we relied on each other to survive. That learning is at the core of our existence, which, yes, if we didn't continue to overcome the challenges that the environment presented with us, then we probably would have become extinct, and some other species would have taken over, if you like. And then the third one, which is very interesting, I think, is that as we learn, we become a different person, and therefore there's a very close link between learning and our identities. So those are the assumptions that underlie social learning theory, and this is as per the 1998 book of Etienne Wenger. So I don't know, on from there, I mean, the idea of communities of practice, it was really through studying how people in different organizations actually operate and how they learn in their practice that Wenger and Jean Lave also came up with the concept of community of practice. But again, it's something that's been around for centuries. If you think about the apprenticeship model, so way back when there were the guilds, and then the apprentices would learn in the community of whatever the practice was.
That's an interesting one, that we become so formalized we may have moved away from our natural way of learning and tried to impose a structure that's maybe not so helpful to us, with very formalized classrooms and siloing learning and that sort of thing. Just in general, not just speaking about sport and coaching here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you think about it, actually in modern days there are examples of less and less of these examples, but still there are small schools in the country which are multi-grade schools. And actually, from what I have read, those schools, the students in those schools tend to do very, very well, because it's a natural sort of a community of practice. So you'll have students who are a little more advanced will be helping those who are less advanced. And really, this makes the teacher's job easier, and it is in line with the work of, for instance, Vygotsky. We talked about the zone of proximal development, where you want to be learning through observing and interacting with somebody who's just a little more advanced than you are in your skills and competence. And actually, this totally relates to sport, because if you're going to take a person and try and teach them a sports skill, for instance, myself, if I'm going to be teaching a young person or even a beginner adult how to ski, it's not helpful for me to demonstrate a world-class turn, because it's so far removed from what they would be able to do. They would never be able to accomplish that. So, when we're teaching sports skills, we always try and model something that's a little bit more advanced than what our learner is able to do, which is the same as the zone of proximal development.
So so in your work with the communities of practice, how are you being intentional about this? Since this happens naturally, but we kind of moved away from it, how are you being, or what's the concept behind making this more of an intentional way of learning?
Okay, well, really it boils down to creating what we call the learning imperative. So there needs to be something that everybody in the group is interested in learning. And now a community of practice over time, it's not to say that everybody in the community will always be fully engaged. Participation tends to move according to whatever the topic or whatever the current practice challenge is. People will move in and out of the community and move from the core more to the periphery. But essentially, if you want to create a community of practice, you need to have people that are interested enough in whatever the practice is, and able to interact with very, very contemporary issues, so problems that they're facing directly in their practice now. And then in this way, you're going to be able to create value for them by using that community of practice as a type of laboratory where they can share and co-create knowledge and then take that knowledge out into their practice, engage in the practice, try it out, and then come back and more or less report to the community of practice. This is why you need this ongoing engagement to happen. And there's a lot around facilitation. In sport, we have the problem of being quite a competitive culture. And in order for that type of learning to take place, what we say is people have to check their egos at the door. So you need to not be worried, for instance, that you're going to look like you don't know something if you ask a question. You also need to be, as a person who may know more than other people in the community, you need to be very open and respectful in how you respond to people's, challenging issues.
That can be.
There are a whole bunch of facilitation techniques that you can use to create a healthy community of practice.
So it sounds like to start with, you've got to have a group of people who are willing to walk in the door and say, hey, there's stuff I don't know, and also that group of people has to come in without one of the most frustrating things that I work with in coaches is that too many coaches think I have a secret that I don't want to give away, because if I give it away, then it levels the playing field, or it hurts me as a competitor. So you have to have people who, one, realize there really are no secrets in this and be willing to share. And I guess, how have you strategized in bringing those people together in groups, and as we struggle with that, at least in a few sports I know of?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not always that easy. Right now, as a particular practice that I'm a bit challenged in. I think it goes back to creating value. If you can figure out a way to create value and they experience value, then hopefully they'll be a little more open to sharing. But again, you will never have uniform necessarily participation. and there are people that will guard their secrets all the way through. They will probably benefit because they will learn things from other people. They will learn who knows what, for instance, and where to go if they need help. But, a person who's genuinely kind of an introvert and doesn't like to share, you're probably not going to change that person. But the idea would be to, one of the things you can do, which helps, is to kind of share leadership roles. So you put different groups of people in the community of practice in charge of different roles, like, for instance, one could be somebody in charge of the agenda, making sure that all the voices are being heard. So there'd be some work behind the scenes in between, let's say, group get-togethers where an agenda activist might try and draw out from a person who's less willing to share some of the issues that might help them overcome that. And then you have something like maybe reporters. So you'll have a group of people in the community who will report back to everybody, kind of document what's been going on in the community. So shared distributed leadership is something that does help people kind of buy into the community feeling. But in terms of the person who really doesn't want to share, one thing that's very important is that you have you need to have endorsement from the people that are further up the hierarchy than those people who are trying to share their secrets. So if you have like a high performance director or something who's really on board with what you want to do and who actually participates in the meetings as well, that can help people kind of get over that idea of trying to guard their secrets.
Well, I sort of think with a lot of things, if the folks come to this group again, I like the idea of, what are you going to get out of it? What's the value in doing this? That those people probably who are coming in the door are willing to share their ideas anyway. If anything, maybe another problem might be the person who wants to dominate the group, and especially if they're in an influential position, a national team coach or someone at that level, that they may throw that in. And of course, if they're all national team coaches, that is mitigated somewhat. So what you talked about facilitation issues earlier, we talked about facilitating skills. So what are some of the skills that folks need in facilitating a community of practice?
Well, you sort of, I think from the beginning, you need to sort of, like any kind of facilitator, you have to be able to sort of walk in the shoes of everybody around the table. So you need to kind of try and, establish that trust between yourself and each of the individual people that are in the group. So you've got to do, again, some background work and some work outside of the actual group meetings. If you have some credibility, obviously that helps you to begin with. But yes, you need to establish trust is really, really important. I think like any kind of a group situation, I think setting some ground rules is an important thing to do, and you, of course, would like to get the community involved in setting their own. So, for instance, if you have that dominant coach who's in the group, and there are a number of coaches that are perhaps underneath that coach in the organizational structure, it needs to be very clearly understood that, they cannot make a judgment. You need to set a judgment-free environment if you really want to be creative and innovative in the kind of solutions that you're going to come up with for your issues, whatever they are. I believe that you as a facilitator also need to work very carefully in those strategic conversations with the actual organization, so outside, beyond the community, moving towards, let's say, the NSO or whatever it is, the organization that has brought you in to do this. It's important that you do that work. So you're working within the community on a sort of, if you like, horizontal level, but you're also got to work in a vertical way, making sure that the work of the community that you're actually doing is being well reported to the organization and is reflected in that you're also aligning with some of the organization's strategic goals. So those kind of things are sort of, there's work within the community as a facilitator, and there's also work beyond the community with the greater landscape, as we call it.
Right. And so essentially bringing a group of people together, and is this often, is it, sorry, fumbling with my thought here, do you usually bring a group of people together to look at perhaps one narrow issue, or does this tend to be broad, bringing people together and let's figure out what the group wants to do or solve a problem, or however you want to look at that? I guess which comes first in that scenario, or can it be either way?
Well, generally speaking, you're better off to address the immediate needs of the community members. So let's say the global objective, or maybe of the organization, is we want to do, coach development. We want to improve outcomes so that we get, in the end, better outcomes with our athletes. Okay, that's a very general objective. The idea would be to have the actual coaches come up with what are the issues that they're struggling with. So if you have just and let's say you have a bunch of youth coaches and you get them together, one way to do it would be just to kind of have a first meeting to introduce the whole concept, and everybody gets to know each other, and you as a facilitator. And then what I've done in the past is have them go out and coach and come back with 1, 2, maybe even up to 3 things that they have faced that have challenged them in their coaching, or that they've either learned something that works or something that doesn't work. It's very, very concrete and very anchored in their everyday coaching practice. So then you have them come back, and then they share that with the group. So maybe one youth sport coach will say, well, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm young, but I really feel like the parents are pushing me around, let's say. They're not respecting my decision. And then, the other coaches will jump on board and talk about it. First of all, they may normalize it and say, wow, welcome to youth sport. But they might, and there may be some coaches in there that have had 20 years of experience that are able to tell this young coach that, that's normal, and it's not because you're just starting out in this. It really is something that happens to all of us. So that's a good thing. And then, people share their strategies and help that youth coach in, maybe coming up with some solutions for how to deal with these parents. And then the coach will go out and try it out and come back and report on it. So it's really very, very anchored in their everyday coaching needs. That's the thing, because we can all go to coaching courses and we can read books and we can learn all the theory and all the great strategies to use, but until you actually put them into practice, your practice is always very contextual and very specific in your instances of using that knowledge. It's not necessarily easy to transfer what you learn from a course or from a book into actual practice. And so by anchoring your discussions in these everyday situations that are occurring, you help that coach be able to move that knowledge from the textbook or the course into their actual practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. When I was at a previous NGB, we really focused probably more than maybe we should have on very theoretical things, and then expected to be able to turn them loose and then go out and apply them on things such as periodization of training, something fairly concrete, but also pretty darn complex. And kind of realized after a little while that we're probably not doing them any favors by doing that, and unfortunately didn't have that chance to do feedback with that group, because it was typically a very, it's a very typical of what most of us do. We do a coaching clinic and send them back home, and then there's no follow-up or anything with it, which is something I am looking to change as I go forward on that, to create each one of those groups as being a community of practice, even if they're scattered across the country. That doesn't mean they can't get together, like we are here on a conference call, and doing
exactly.
That. Yeah. And,
yeah, that was ideal. And another thing is encouraging, when you do have people coming, clubs sending people or organizations sending people to courses, would be encourage them to send more than one, so that at least there's 2 of them that go back to their organization. And between the two of them, they can work through things together, as well as they can help other coaches that are there that didn't go to the course. But yeah, follow up. I mean, I think we do tons of great things in our more formal coach education. We just need to, this tool or this type of social learning space is something that can be used on top of that, layered on top as an add-on that helps people transfer that knowledge into their actual practice. Because when you do that, you know, there's theoretical knowledge and there's practical knowledge. And practical knowledge is always inherently very localized. It's very indigenous. So by helping coaches figure out their problems in their actual situation, you're making that leap from the more theory side to the practice side.
Yeah, and I think we're making the coaches' experience a whole lot better too if they can walk away with at least something to try to solve that problem. It may take several, strategies and several attempts to do it. They may come back a few weeks later and, well, that didn't work very well either, and they have to try something else. But at least they probably feel like I'm getting value out of this. I'm getting something out of this to where I'm helping, myself as a coach, and hopefully that's making a good experience for whoever their athletes are as well. In there.
Yeah, exactly. And then lots of times in that community, you can have other coaches ask good questions, or facilitator ask good questions to maybe raise the awareness of the coach. They may like that young coach that I was talking about, let's say, that had problems with the parents. The first thing that coach thought was, oh, it's just because I'm young, they're not respecting me. But in fact, no, it happens to coaches who've been coaching for 20 years as well. So you're able to raise the awareness of the coach around some of the other perspectives involved in the issue.
Well, I'm gonna riff off of the situation I was talking about. So probably everybody in this on this call puts together coaching clinics, and people come from far and wide. What are some things that in those coaching clinics perhaps that we can do that's, I'm going to go ahead and be very generalized here and stereotypical. A lot of times the clinics are someone standing at the front of the room, the John Kessel calls it the sage on the stage. And how do we maybe transfer that to more of what he calls, the guide by your side in those coaching clinics, rather than just, spewing out information that they need, or that they want, or that we think that they need. That may be the biggest problem right there, is that we're assuming that we're meeting their needs when maybe we're not on there. So how can we maybe integrate some of this in with we've got to dump knowledge.
Hello?
Oh, hey, Diane.
You just cut out.
I dropped. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm here, but
okay, I may have hit my mute button by mistake. Most of us run very traditional coaching clinics, I would assume, where we've got the person up on the stage spewing information. How do we maybe involve some of these ideas of community practice into those very traditional clinic settings?
Well, I mean, I'm from Canada, and we have had for many years our National Coaching Certification Program. And the current iteration of it, it was 20 years ago, they did a big sort of evaluation, and they changed their approach. So they changed their approach from the sage on the stage to trying to get more to the guide on the side. Now, it's obviously a large-scale coach education program, so there is a specific curriculum, and there is specific material that is covered in each module. So the way they came up with that was they did a big task analysis and so on and so forth. Are you there?
Yep.
So it's not entirely driven by the immediate needs of those coaches in the room. But on the other hand, you can use a format that allows, and I think this is really critical because it helps coaches realize that this is actually a great way to learn, and they can carry this out beyond the course. So you do a format where they are actually, yes, they're getting some information from the coach developer. They might also be getting information from a resource book, but they're also trying to solve problems with each other. So it's a sort of problem-based format where they'll be introduced to an issue, and then they're given a chance to try and individually respond to that issue. And they're doing this all in a workbook. And then after that, they're actually instructed to talk to their neighbor about it and see what the neighbor thinks about their solution, or a small group of people around them. And then they will be introduced to some new information, like I said, either from the facilitator or by reading something in the reference materials. And then they go back to their initial response and see how it matches with the new information, so they can either validate it or change it or whatever. So that's this problem-based approach that we use now in the NCCP courses. And I actually teach it. It's designed for 20, 25 people in most of the community workshops that we give. But at the university, I've taught it for up to 115 people. Quite a challenge at first.
Yeah, I would think so.
But I regularly teach it to around between 60 and 80 people, students. And invariably at the end, the students, because they do a reflection at the end on their learning, they all say how amazing it was to be able to learn from the coaches around them and to be, interacting and working like that. So in that way, we're kind of trying to create the beginning of a social learning space for these students, coaching students. So there are ways definitely to do it. There's no question about it. It's how you design your curriculum. And then, of course, that's in the classroom. And then beyond that, you do something like you were talking about, which is maybe create some kind of a post-course community of practice that online will meet, once a month to discuss issues that they're having.
Oh. And I know that some of that happens very informally, where people are at a clinic for a weekend and they become, friendly with one or two people in the group, and then they may continue that, but that's happenstance and not very intentional. And I know some organizations have set up mentoring programs to try to formalize that. This sounds like it would be another way of approaching that, and perhaps even more efficient, because it's not just one-on-one. It's several people that you can get ideas from, rather than just expecting one person to be able to give me all the answers that I've ever wanted.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what you're saying is really important, because we do have to be intentional about it. So it's kind of there was a big debate early on about whether you can, communities of practice exist naturally. Okay, they're
exactly.
organic. So actually, can you actually create them? So the author Wenger himself shifted on this, because originally he studied an organic community of practice, but in factual fact, yes, he came in a couple of years later with a book about cultivating communities of practice. So intentionality is something that I think really we have to do it. We have to bear it in mind. We have to try and intentionally create these situations.
Well, and one thing that came to mind as I was jotting down a note here too is that the communities of practice at a very local level, so here, let's say in Colorado Springs, there's no reason that you can't have a community of practice of coaches from various sports. And in fact, there may be a huge strength in doing that hockey, soccer, swim coaches, fencing coaches get together and discuss these things, and that may help out as well. That doesn't have to just be, 4 soccer coaches getting together and sharing things, and that, the community of practice can be cross-sport, and especially when you're dealing with some of those issues, hey, am I getting respected? What can I do because the parents are on my case? Well, I bet every soccer or hockey, every other coach has to go through that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do that at the youth sport level, and actually I would say that the further up you go towards high performance, the more success you're going to have if you bring in people from different sports, because then you take away that sort of competitive element.
Oh, good point. Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of just very basic, that you just don't have that many people who are national team coaches, so your pool would be pretty small. That'd be a small community if it's just our in fencing's cases, our 8 national team coaches, or actually 9 national team coaches. Pretty small pool, and but if and the USOC, I think, does a really nice job with this with their Coach Accelerator program. They bring in coaches from a variety of sports, and all the learning is sport agnostic. But I know that the coaches that from fencing have been through it have really liked talking with the coaches in other sports, because one, they find out, oh, good, it's not just our sport, because I think we oftentimes have the idea that what's happening is just happening in my sport, and
yeah,
many of us know that's not the case. And so I think that they get that. Plus, I think it just gives them somebody different to bounce ideas off. And like you said, they may be more willing to go to a coach in another sport, because maybe I don't want to look dumb to a coach in my own sport, but I'm willing to ask the question to, the coach from swimming, because, my ego is not as involved in that world, and I'm not worried about it getting back to, the athletes. Oh God, that guy's so dumb, he didn't even know how to do something, and kind of thing. So egos are important.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You got to check your ego at the door. That's what my first community of practice that I created. That's what the head coach of the group said at the end. He said, you need to check your ego at the door.
I'm just picturing something funny here that when you go into a really nice concert hall or something, there's a coat check over that you can get a tag for. Maybe when people come in, you have a sign that says, ego check here, and you give them a little, index card thing or a little tab that, that you get your ego back when you leave. And
that's great.
I'm going to do that at a coaching clinic once when I get to that status. I'm going to try to remember that idea and use it, because I think it can be very beneficial and a very funny way to introduce
Let me know how it goes.
Yeah, well, anybody else out there who wants to steal that idea, go for it, because I know I won't be implementing that for a couple of months here for sure. But I like trying to start something off light and funny, as a in a very serious way, and make a little bit light of it, but also get the message across too. So I know the first time I'll try this will be the summer for sure. With that, so go ahead.
No, I was just saying that sounds good.
All right. So, summarize some of what are the strengths of setting up a community of practice or instilling this intentionally? And then I'm also going to ask you, what are some of the drawbacks in a communities of practice setup?
Well, I mean, maybe I'll start off with the drawbacks. I mean, there's been criticism that, first of all, there's kind of a misconception around the word community, because most people sort of have a warm and fuzzy feeling about the word community. But in actual fact, so you get people saying, well, it's just like a reproduction of ideas, and it's like a mutual admiration society, and, people aren't really challenging ideas and challenging practices within a community. So that's something that, again, it's kind of related to the ego at the door thing, but there needs to be this, a community does not mean that everybody agrees, that there's consensus on everything, and that everybody is sort of homogenous. That does not create a good learning community. So I guess the challenge is to really just be sure that people understand that we're not here to agree on everything. We're here to advance our knowledge around our practice. And in order to do that, I mean, to change things, you don't keep it the same, right? You need to bring different elements in and try different things out. So, and then there's the power issue that we talked about. That's one of the challenges, making sure that we have an even playing ground so that there's respect everywhere, and that we can have this judgment-free environment where people can feel free to throw things out there and try crazy ideas. Innovation doesn't happen unless you have that kind of an environment. I mean, getting people together. Coaches love to get together. I mean, coaches love to talk about coaching, right? So that's not usually an issue. I'd say the big thing you have to really keep in mind is that you have to have that learning agenda or that learning imperative front and center, and that you're really making sure that you're creating value. People are busy. Coaches are busy. I mean, if you're talking youth sport, a lot of them, this is like a volunteer job on the side of whatever else they do. Like I had one coach say to me, you know, I work 36 hours or 37 hours a week to support my 40 hours of coaching. So, you know, people like that don't need to waste their time, you know. So you really have to make sure that it's a pleasant experience, but also a valuable experience. So along the lines of pleasant experience, if you're doing it in person, of course, it's always nice to have a bit of food, especially, you know, like that people have to eat, so do it around a time when they have to eat anyway, and you're making, you know, a little bit of a budget is definitely helpful. So that's where you have to do your strategic conversations with your organization.
Okay.
I you know, just don't want to start too big either. I'd say you start with a reasonable number, sort of somewhere between maybe 8 and 18 people or something.
Okay. Many people have heard me say this. One of these days I'm going to plan a conference that just has one session in the morning, and then the rest of the time people are eating and drinking and talking. And that would be every day. And, of course, you know, because it seems like so many good conversations happen during those times when you're not in sessions and you're sitting around and everybody's had, you know, one beer or a glass of wine in them, and that one person, then the inhibition goes away, is willing to ask a question that just begins the conversation. And I've seen that happen at high levels where, you know, sitting around dinner, I can remember it used to be this altitude conference in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I remember after dinner sitting around with a large table with coaches who had coached Olympic medalists and world champions, and I felt very out of place for one thing. And somebody, and I don't remember what the question was, I don't remember who the coach was, but somebody asked a question of, hey, I'm having, you know, anybody else having a problem with whatever it was? And it began this discussion, and then, of course, it ramped off. And, you know, that would not have happened in a formal session with somebody at the front, you know, with PowerPoint slides. And so I long thought that that's an important aspect of any conference.
Right. So there we go. So you were talking about ways that formal coach education can help with the social learning thing. Well, organize a meal. You know, have a dinner. Do your coursework and then have a dinner, because that will be the time when people will, just like you just said, and then especially if it's a multi-day course, then you'll find things are starting to loosen up and people are starting to share more in the formal setting if they've had that social time to connect.
Yeah, and you know, and they also, I think, find out who are the coaches I may click with and I feel really comfortable with as well, and that maybe I'm willing to call up afterwards. And I've had a number of large coaching summits with 100 coaches or so, and they've told me that, you know, the best part that, you know, they always said the sessions are great and I always enjoy them. I know the information is really good. I'm never concerned about that, to be quite honest. I'm maybe a little arrogant on that, but I get more of a thrill when people come and say, hey, that's great, but you know what? I met so-and-so here who's going to help me out with something, and that brings the biggest smile on my face, because that's what I want them to leave there, is that they got what they needed out of it. And I know a few groups that have been, you know, together for a while that met at one of the clinics that we put on, and that have kept that, you know, collegial and friendship up for, you know, for several years, to the point that when they would attend clinics later on, they would, you know, they'd room together because they, you know, they like that. So we can be good. We can be certainly good catalysts for those sorts of activities, and working those into our more formal settings intentionally, rather than just having it happenstance, I think would be really good. Well, cool.
Yeah, like you could have a 2-day course where you do a lot more theory in the first day, and then you do like a social event in the evening, and then the second day you've got people split up into smaller round tables around certain issues.
Yep. And
much more addressing their immediate needs of trying to apply whatever that theory is that they've learned the day before.
Yeah, I think for my own growth anyway, I've really thought a lot critically about what I've done in the past and what I want to do going forward, and those are some of the things from our talk here. Very much apply them to future, you know, coaching seminars and clinics to start to develop that idea of community practice, and also encouraging people out there to, you know, start small groups in their, you know, in the cities that they live in, to to help formulate these things and to share knowledge amongst NGBs as well. We've got a lot of NGBs doing great things, and there are probably dozens of coaches here in Colorado Springs who've attended their respective NGB trainings, and it'd be cool to have them come together and just share that, hey, we learned this, and then maybe then it also goes back to where the coaches from those NGBs who don't have that maybe go up the line and talk to the coach educator about, hey, you might want to include this in here. And then those of us who are coach educators, sharing our ideas around during things like the USCC Summit, shameless plug, as an opportunity for us to share ideas back and forth as well on that.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we're getting near the end of our time here, and I want to reiterate to folks who are dialed in here who are logged in. If you want to ask a question, shoot it in the chat box, and I'll get to that. I guess, yesterday you and I had a little talk, and I'd say there were a couple of things I wanted to bring up, but we're getting close to the time here, and I am very conscious of everyone's time. What are some key things that you would recommend us as coach educators, do to help move our education efforts forwards, outside of maybe what we've talked about here, and just in general practices, an observer of coaching education in Canada and a little bit in New Zealand, I'm sure. What are some things you would recommend for us to do?
Well, I don't know exactly how you do this in your system, but it is frustrating as a Canadian to go to your summit and to listen to be perfectly honest, to listen to all these really good people get up and present on the work that they're doing, but it's like, why aren't they getting together and doing it together? I mean, if the USCCE could get everyone together and create some, standard modules and standard approach, I think it would be good, because I just feel like you've got a lot of different people doing the same thing.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit about this yesterday. Sorry to refer to that, for those that don't know, we were testing out, making sure everything worked, and I asked her specifically about why is it the Canadians are so good at having structure, and part of it is your system is set up a little bit better for it. We don't have a Ministry of Sport. We don't have one entity in the U.S., at least at that level. The USOC, the charter for the Ted Stevens Sports Act, says they are to be the leader in coaching education. And to their credit, lately, Chris and his group have started moving more in that direction for sure, and trying to come up with working on those common ground sorts of things, and just very informally, several NGBs have worked together on things, and we've talked about it amongst a small group of, how do we do this? Is there a way that we could come up with something that we go into a city and we say, hey, look, all coaches, here's something that's, the first half of the day is going to be sport agnostic, and then maybe it's the second half of the day they break up into sport specific things, because coaches inherently want that, hey, how can I get better at teaching somebody, how to do a parry 4, fencing terminology there, so they want that, and so we kind of got to give them that. But this other part too, where it may be that hockey, soccer, fencing, cycling coach all in a room for the morning, and then perhaps part of it's going in, how do you apply that? And again, you need probably more than one from each sport. So maybe there's a little movement in that way, and I think that the fact that many of us get together at things like the USCC Summit bring us together to share these ideas and doing that. So it may take a while. It may be very informal, but I think we're all seeing that there's a great ability to share information amongst us, and even the coach educators are getting better at sharing invitations with one another to come to events that they're putting on. I shout out to Dan Rabb at USA Ultimate, who invited several of us over to their recent kind of coaching symposium that they had. And I know Kenny Forehand up at USA Rugby has made kind of an open invitation to us as well to come to anything that they're putting on. And I hope that others start to do that, so that we do understand what's going on and also see how we can partner together. So sorry, I got on my soapbox for a moment there. Yeah, doing that. So, well, Diane, I don't see any questions in queue, which I'm going to take as a sample that we covered everything anyone would ever want to know about this. Let me ask you a question. You started at the top with a facilitator group that you go to, that you said you started going to, that you were the only coaching education person there. What is that? What is that group or organization or conference called? And I'll make sure that gets in the notes for this call.
Right. Okay. So that is actually it's on the website is Wenger, which is Wenger. Well, I can send it to you anyway. It's Wenger-Traynor's website.
Okay.
Wenger is the theorist to develop the whole landscape of practice, communities of practice thing. And he is married to an independent learning consultant called Beverly. They both took both names, so they're Wenger-Traynor now. And so they do this. It's really an exceptional situation. And they get people that are very much practitioners as well as academic people. So they do these 4-day, all-day workshops. They do them in California in the summer. They also started doing some in Europe and Portugal. And they also will travel and put them on for different organizations. So I'll send you the link so you can put it up there. And if people are interested, it's really an incredible experience, I have to say. I mean, I keep going back and back and back because every time I learn more. So, yeah. Sam? Hello?
Sorry about that. I keep hitting my mute button because I'm coughing this morning, and then I forget to unmute myself. Sorry about that. I was going to say in a really strong or in a really weird one was when I Googled communities of practice and my research for the call, I came up with Wenger-Traynor.com as one of the sites I was reading stuff on, and now I've got it open here and looking at their workshops now that you mentioned that. So so I will share that with everybody, and I'm going to start doing a little digging in here and looking around and seeing that and what they have to offer, because it sounds really fascinating thing to go through on that. So thanks for that.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, on another note, the ICCE, before their global conference in Tokyo, they are bringing the Wenger-Traynors for a 2-day coach developer workshop.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I think I saw something about that on an announcement that I got as well on that one, but I'd forgotten about it. Very cool. Very good. All right. Well, Diane, one last question: are you on social media? Do you tweet or Instagram or anything like that that we could share?
I do have both of those. I'm not terribly active, but yes, I am there. So do you want me to send you those, or did you want me to tell you them now?
Go ahead and share what you're at on Twitter and Instagram. That'd be great. Okay,
so on Twitter I am. Let me double check so I make sure I get this right. It's at DI _ Culver, CULVER.
Okay. Very cool.
And then on, hold on just a sec. My Instagram is, hold on. Yes, hold on just a second. I think it's DM for Mary C _ski.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
All right. I'll double check those and put them in the show notes so we'll get the accurate ones in there for sure. Well, Diane, once again, thank you and for your time and talking a little bit about communities of practice. It gave me 2 pages of notes here and ideas that I will certainly put forward as I move forward in my coaching education and developing the coaches at USA Fencing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I mean, please feel free to put my email up as well, because I'm very happy to answer questions if people want to talk to me about setting them up. More than happy to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Culver, very much, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye.